Shabbat Shalom, my friends. Our Sedra is Metzora, Leviticus chapter 14, beginning with verse 1 and following. Most years, last week's Sedra and this week's Sedra, Tazria and Metzora, are read together at the very same time. But this is a leap year, so that the two Sedras are separated, and that's a good thing. You ask me why. Because it makes for a shorter Torah reading. You ask, why is that important? Because this Shabbat is also called Shabbat HaGadol, the Great Sabbath, the Sabbath immediately preceding Pesach. We all know that this coming Friday evening, Jews around the globe will be gathering together to observe Pesach first Seder. So this very Shabbat morning, rabbis are to give long, detailed teachings about how to prepare for and how to observe Pesach. Traditionally, therefore, this Shabbat, the rabbi is expected to preach for a very long time. And that's great. So it's really quite excellent that we have a shortened Torah reading make way for the rabbi. Now, funny thing is, I was preparing for this shiur, this lesson. I noticed an anomaly on the Chabad website. It states that this day is called Shabbat HaGadol, the Great Sabbath, because a great miracle happened on this day. On this day, the firstborn sons of the Egyptians, having watched in fear as the first 9 plagues ravaged Egypt, went to Pharaoh and demanded the immediate release of the Israelites. When Pharaoh refused, the Egyptian firstborn sons, knowing what that 10th plague was going to be, rose up in rebellion and attacked the Egyptian army, inadvertently weakening it enough so as to ease the eventual exodus of the Israelites from Egypt. So, according to Chabad, that's what the Gadol means, this miracle. But is that really what Gadol symbolizes? The miracle of the rebellion of the Egyptian firstborn sons? So I went to the greatest Torah sage of our day, namely Rabbi Google, and the good rabbi told me exactly what I had already known to be true. On this Shabbat, the Haftarah is taken from the prophet Malachi, chapter 3. In that specially selected Haftarah for this date, we read the following. Behold, I send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great Gadol, the great and awesome day of the Lord. Great in Hebrew is Gadol. Thus, Shabbat HaGadol, the Shabbat preceding Pesach, is when we read of the promised coming of the prophet Elijah and the beginning of the Messianic kingdom. Now, I would never call out Chabad for making a text mistake, so the choice is yours. How did this Shabbat become Shabbat HaGadol? You choose. As for me, I'm putting my money on Malachi. Now, shifting. The great scholar, and this time I really mean a great scholar, Rabbi Jacob Milgram, drilled down deeply into our Sedra, a text which deals with what some would call a scale disease. Scale. We all now know that it is etymologically incorrect to call that disease leprosy or Hansen's disease. Milgram will not grant to the authors of this text any advanced degrees in pathogenesis or infectious diseases. Rather, our text is all about ritual contamination and the danger of contaminating a sanctuary. So we have to learn how to read this Sedra correctly. Many of the nations in the ancient Middle East had concerns about individuals who could bring about the contamination of a sanctuary. Those nations viewed such contamination to be the product of the activity of demons and of evil spirits who sought to drive the God itself out of the sanctuary. So the God needed to be protected. And that was the job of the priests. But for Israel, our text, no demons were involved. The sanctuary, however, can indeed be threatened by people who bear the stigma of sin. The stigma of sin as evidenced by their skin disease, the scale disease. And here again, it is the job of the priests to protect the sanctuary from such damaging individuals. In Milgram's words, humanity has replaced the demon. We're the ones who can drive God out of the holy places. People who rebel against God pollute the sanctuary, and that sacred space no longer can house the presence of God. Sin drives God out of the sanctuary here in Leviticus. Only by strictly following the instructions of the priest can order be restored. Think of it. Who we are and what we do can so contaminate the sanctuary that the divine presence cannot stand being there. This understanding of ritual contamination, the Hebrew word is tuma, literally has created an entire field of study devoted to finding out what were those sins so egregious that they could have such power as driving God out of the sanctuary. Now, I think we know this. The best known sin with such power is gossip, lashon hara, gossip. Through wonderful linguistic contortions, it is proven by the rabbis that gossip or evil speech can destroy a human life. Here are the proof text. Miriam spread gossip about her brother Moses, and she was stricken with the scale disease. Moses at the burning bush denied the capability of God of liberating the Israelites from Egypt, and Moses was then struck with scale disease. When we act in such a way that we are publicly indicating disobedience to the will of God, then the sinner is visited with a publicly visible sign, scale disease, of God's displeasure. I want to point out that this approach is not exactly mainstream Judaism. Most of the time, we speak of sin as eating away at us, filling us with guilt, driving us to repent. But here, certain sins result in publicly visible indications of divine disfavor. Such people, we call them sinners, contaminate others and cannot approach places of holiness until they have restored their relationship with God. That's what this Sedra is really all about. It's not a big leap at all to connect what we are studying here with how some people use social media to publicly shame others. The Torah insists that those who shame others through evil speech are to be ostracized, cut off from the community, denied access to the holy, until they have undertaken restorative teshuvah. And we're going to take a break, start the second tape. Don't forget to join us quickly.